Hey everyone, welcome to our very first episode of Crime Family. For this podcast, we're keeping it all in the family. We're three siblings who share a love for true crime, and we're going to be discussing our favorite true crime cases that involve crimes against family members and loved ones. Thanks for joining us. Our first case is a really complex and interesting one. It's the Vallow Daybell case, and it has everything from murder and missing kids to talk of a religious cult and doomsday obsessions. With all that being said, let's get started. Since this case is so complicated, we chose to split it up and we each researched different sections. AJ is going to start it off with the background of how it all got started, and then I'm going to talk about some of the relationships involved. Steph will then finish it off, talking about the findings and get us up to date with the trial. Here we go.
All right, so I'll take it away, and I will be talking mostly about the initial investigation and kind of what got it all started. So it all begins on November 26th of 2019, when Kay Woodcock, she hadn't seen her grandson JJ in a few months, and she was getting a little bit concerned about his well-being, so she had called the police and requested that they do a welfare check at the home of Lori Vallow, which is JJ's adoptive mother. She has custody of him, and so she just wanted the police to go over there and make sure everything was okay. So the police go and they do this welfare check, and their initial visit with Lori, there's actually some audio of the police body cam footage. So we're going to play a little bit of that audio for you. It was initially about a 12-minute clip, but I've edited it down to about 4 or 5 minutes, and it's a very interesting piece of audio. So we'll play that for you, and then we'll come back and discuss.
Hi, you Lori. Lori, I'm Lieutenant Vallow, Police Department. How are you? You got a minute? You alone, or that help? Or?
My brother's here.
Okay. This is Detective Stubbs.
Hello.
So, we're here.
Yeah, this is a big mess. I just talked to the guy on the phone.
And what did he ask you?
He was just saying that he wanted to do a well check on JJ.
So, JJ would be where?
He's in Arizona.
Who's he with in Arizona?
He's with one of my friends in Arizona.
Oh. Who's the friend he's with?
My friend Melanie. Her son has autism. Her name is Melanie Gibb. I gave him all the information on the phone.
Okay, so he can call him?
Yeah.
Discord.
Yeah. What is all this?
We're a little concerned
Why?
because, well, the officers who were here earlier were checking, and they got a bad vibe that like something was going on here because nobody knew anything about a child. They weren't talking.
It's because a lot of stuff has gone on. If you want to know, it's a lot of stuff. So.
Well, that's why we're concerned, because it just was kind of weird.
It is very weird. I've had to move around a lot. One of my brothers is trying to kill me. Not the brother that lives here, obviously. He's kind of my protector. My other brother that was in with my husband, who was trying to kill me for my $2 million life insurance policy.
No.
So a lot of stuff has gone on in this last year. It's been a horrible year for us. I've had to move around. And so I was going to move back to Arizona, put my son back in the school there, because I tried to put him in school here, public school at Kennedy.
Okay.
He went for 2 months. We tried it, but he had such a hard time. Now, the person who called is my sister-in-law, but she's his natural grandmother. He's adopted by us. Okay, so her son, who's a drug addict, had a baby with a girl who's a drug addict, and they took him from, CPS took him, gave him to the grandmother. She came and got him, and then she wanted us to adopt him, which we did. And we loved him.
By
and
us,
my husband and I, who died earlier this year.
Okay.
He passed away. Since he passed away, she's been trying to fight me for him and being really horrible to me and that kind of stuff. She's kind of the paternal friend.
Okay, thank you.
That makes sense?
That's what I needed. The paternal grandmother.
He has autism and ADHD. He doesn't really talk to people. Like he's very special needs. So I had him in a special needs school there. She was trying to. So what happened was, my husband, who we were married for 15 years and had raised all these 5 kids together, switched his life insurance policy to her, right? To his sister, who got $1 million when he died, and we got nothing. For me to raise JJ, and all the kids got nothing, and everybody got nothing. She got $1 million. So I knew she was going to try to sue me for him, or
JJ?
Yeah, because she now has this $1 million, so she can hire people to help him, and I have nothing.
But you have legal custody.
He's my son. I adopted him when he was 2 years. We had him from the time he was 8 months old till 2 years old. So she does nothing that wants to cause me trouble. So I don't tell people the truth about where we are and what we're doing because of those reasons. So I look like a suspect, but I am not a good person. I've raised all of my kids. I've done everything that I'm supposed to do in life, but everyone is causing me trouble right now. So.
And our only concern in this whole thing
is
the child.
I got it.
And so that's where we're at on the, and then we were just a little weirded out when, and I understand now that we've heard your side of the story.
It's awful. I feel like I'm being tracked all the time. Like, why are police coming to my door? What did I do?
They said they were out visiting with 2 guys, and I assume one's your brother.
Who was visiting? Yeah.
Who was the other one? The other guy they were visiting with. There were 2.
Visiting.
Well, we had 2 detectives over here trying to.
Looking for you a little while ago.
Oh, because I was at the store.
And they ran into probably one of your brothers.
My brother and his friend, probably.
Oh, who's
They've been
that?
moving. Chad.
Chad from around here?
Mm-hmm.
What's his last name? Yeah. Okay. All right.
It's just a mess that is constantly causing me trouble.
Chad the D-A-Y-B-E-L-L?
Mm-hmm. He's an author.
Doesn't he live like out in the? Isn't that the Chatty Bell that? Didn't his wife pass away recently? Is that him?
I don't know.
I bet it is. Chatty. D-A-Y-B-E-L-L. Yeah.
But it sounds familiar as an author.
I think I know one of his. Has he got a couple of daughters?
He has lots of kids.
So as you can probably tell, some red flags kind of right off the bat, or I know for me at least. What do you guys think, Katie?
To me, she just sounds so defensive when this really isn't a time to be defensive. I mean, he's questioning about where her kids are, and she's just getting very, rattled about it.
Yeah, I agree as well. I feel like she's just rambling on about other things that aren't really pertaining to her child that is missing, and she just is talking about random other life things that happened. Doesn't really seem relevant to the police.
Yeah, so I was suspicious right off the bat hearing that. She's kind of rambling on, and she's going on all these different tangents about her entire, family history instead of just addressing the main reason why the police are there. Which is why, as you can hear in the audio, they're like, our only concern is where JJ is, so they're trying to keep her on track, and she keeps going all over the place. But as you heard, she did say that JJ was with a friend of hers, Melanie Gibb, in Arizona. So this leads the police to Melanie Gibb, and they do call her. She tells them that JJ is not with her. She actually hasn't seen JJ in months. She actually tells them that the last time that she saw JJ was actually on the night of September 22nd. So Melanie and her partner were visiting Lori and her partner Chad, and the 4 of them were recording an episode of their podcast. So they had a religious podcast, and it was in the middle of this recording when Lori's brother Alex comes into the house, and he's carrying JJ. He says JJ is sleeping, so he just goes into Lori's room and puts JJ down for the night. And then the next morning, when they all wake up, JJ's nowhere to be found. he's not in the home, they can't hear him, and, a little bit of context, he was a little bit rambunctious and had a lot of energy, so, her waking up and not hearing him immediately was definitely a red flag for her. And when she questioned about where JJ was, Lori had just said that he was being very out of control and he was climbing up on all the cupboards and everything like that, so she had Alex just take him away for the day. And so that was the last time that she actually saw JJ, and then Lori never really said much else about him after that. And actually, Melanie does come forward about a week after the police initially make contact with her, and she says that Lori and Chad had asked her to lie to the police. They told her not to tell the police where JJ was, and then Lori had said to say that she was at Frozen 2, seeing Frozen 2 at the theater, and she just asked Melanie to take some photos of random kids to make it seem like she was around a lot of kids. So Melanie was, upfront, and she said, I'm not going to lie for you. And of course, she did tell the police the truth. And this is what made the police very suspicious, because obviously, if there's no foul play involved, if everything's on the up and up, why wouldn't she just be honest about where her kids are instead of telling them that he's with Melanie, when obviously she knows that he's not. So of course, this leads the police back to Lori's home, and they go back on November 27th, and they find Lori and Chad both gone, and the house is abandoned. So this kind of leads to a manhunt for the couple, and this is what really sets everything sort of into motion. And during this initial investigation phase, this is when the police find out that JJ's older sister, Tylee Ryan, is also missing. Now, she was last seen even before JJ was last seen. Her last known whereabouts were on September 9th at Yellowstone National Park. So Tylee, JJ, Lori, and Lori's brother Alex, they had all went to Yellowstone National Park for the day. And cell phone records of Alex Cox show that the family left around 6:45 that night to drive back to Rexburg, Idaho. So I actually mapped it out, and Yellowstone National Park is about a 90-minute drive from Rexburg. So they drive the 90 minutes back to Rexburg, and they track his cell phone activity for that night, and they find that he was actually at Lori's home that night, well into the night. So they arrived probably around 8:30 back in Rexburg, and he was in her home until about 3 o'clock the next morning. Now, Lori and Alex lived in the same complex, so they did live very close, but the cellular activity was in Lori's apartment versus his own. And then in the next morning, after that, his cell phone records have him at the property of Chad Daybell. So he was actually there for a couple of hours. And after he leaves Chad Daybell's property that day, they also notice that Chad Daybell has sent a text to his then wife, Tammy Daybell, and he was explaining to her that he had an eventful morning and he shot a raccoon in their backyard and then had to bury the raccoon in the couple's pet cemetery. So they had a big property, and a lot of any household pets that would die, they would bury them in this pet cemetery. So he was just explaining why there was this new grave in their pet cemetery, and Tammy didn't seem alarmed by this. She was just saying, she was just kind of going along with it and saying, oh wow, it sounds like you had an eventful morning. So no red flags went off for her, at least initially. So we have these kids who are going missing within weeks of each other. First Tylee on September 9th, and then JJ on September 22nd. And it's also interesting to note that on September 23rd, which is the same morning that Melanie said she woke up and JJ wasn't anywhere to be found, Alex Cox, they track his cell phone activity, and he again is at the property of Chad Daybell on that morning as well. And he's there for about 17 minutes on that day. In the month of September, you have those kids going missing, and then on October 1st, which is about a week after JJ's was last seen, Lori rents a storage locker near the home. And surveillance video of the storage locker has Lori, Chad, and her brother Alex all visiting the storage locker multiple times throughout the month of October and into November. So they're taking stuff out of the locker, putting things in, and the locker is later found to have a lot of children's belongings in it. So a lot of her kids' belongings are in this storage locker. So very suspicious. When you look at all of these events sort of lined up next to each other, it is very suspicious. And Lori had told some people, like her friends and some other family members, that Tylee was attending a university in Idaho, Brigham Young University, and that she was away at school, which is why, no one would really necessarily think anything of it. She's off at school in September, so when they're not seeing her day to day like they did in the summer, they're not necessarily putting anything together as to why she's nowhere to be found. So in their minds, it all lined up. And Lori was very kind of strategic about what she told certain people and how she sort of explained the whereabouts of Tylee around that time. And also around, while all of this was happening, Tylee's brother Colby, who was older than her, he was getting a little bit suspicious because he hadn't heard from Tylee, and he was noticing that her text messages were quite strange. She was being very short with him, and he could never get her on the phone. She was always avoidant, coming up with an excuse as to why she couldn't talk to him. And he actually received 2 Venmo payments in the month of October from Tylee's account. Now, it's probably very likely that it wasn't actually Tylee sending this money or sending these texts. It was very possibly someone impersonating her in order to avoid any suspicion, because he noticed right away that the text was just, the language she was using was just very, very different than it would normally be. And he was just, his sixth sense went off, and he just felt that something was off, but he didn't really have enough information at that time, I guess, to really, he didn't want to go to the police or anything at that time, because he didn't really have anything concrete to back it up with. He just knew that something seemed off. And now I do want to talk a little bit about the relationship between Chad and Lori, because it is very important to the case. And so Chad and Lori, at the time of the disappearances, they were partners, and they had actually met a year prior in the fall of 2018. And Chad was actually a prolific author. He had written about 27 books, and they were all religious based. So he had written a bunch of nonfiction books about his earlier life, his near-death experiences that he said that he had, also things about his life as a cop that he had, and he was also a grave digger in his earlier years, which is an interesting piece of information. But he was quite well known in the religious community, and Lori was a member of the Latter-day Saints church. So she was very religious, as well as her friend Melanie Gibb, and they were actually attending a religious event in the fall of 2018 where Chad was in attendance. And this is when Lori and Chad first met for the first time. But she was, like I said, she was very well aware of him prior. According to an interview that Melanie Gibb did with Nate Eaton of Dateline, she said that Lori was quite smitten with Chad very, very quickly. It's like she had been waiting for this moment to finally meet him, because she had, known so much about his work, and she was just excited to meet him for the first time. Right after they initially met, it was kind of a whirlwind, and they were, in the months after that, is when things started to go a little bit awry, especially for Lori. So, like I said, Lori was religious prior, but after meeting Chad, her religious beliefs sort of escalated, and they came a little bit darker. In the winter of 2019, so a couple of months after she and Chad met, Lori disappeared for 58 days. She just went off the grid. Nobody really knows where she went. To this day, no one really knows where she was, but it's very likely that she was with Chad. And the kids were with other guardians, so no one was worried about where the kids were because they were accounted for, but Lori herself was just MIA. And then she shows up 58 days later and doesn't really explain to anyone where she was or what she was doing at that time. Now, a big part of the beliefs that Chad and Lori had was about doomsday. So they believed that the end of the world was quickly approaching, and they also believed that this was going to coincide with the second coming of Christ. And Lori specifically, she believed that she was tasked with leading the selected 144,000 into the new world after the apocalypse, and she felt that she was kind of the spiritual leader in order to help people do that. And Chad was very vocal about the power that he believes he had. He could speak to spirits, and he was in communication with a lot of spirits and stuff like that. And he had actually, according to Melanie, Lori had told her that Chad had built a portal for Lori in her closet. So whenever she wanted to communicate with Chad when he wasn't physically there, she could go into the portal and she could communicate with him from there. And she could also, communicate with certain spirits there. And according to Melanie, the spirits would tell her like how many evil people were in the world and who to and tasked her with getting rid of the evil people that were in the world. And also around the same time, she also believed that her children had become zombies. So she had voiced to Melanie shortly before the kids went missing that she believed that JJ had turned into a zombie. And she brought this up to Melanie, who obviously she was kind of taken aback by it, but she just said that Lori was trying to put doubt into her mind about JJ and trying to convince her that there was something off in his behavior. And she really did believe that he had become overtaken by a zombie. She was very alarmed by that. So as you can tell, these beliefs that they had were very, very strange. And Melanie was saying that like Lori was always religious, but it wasn't until after meeting Chad that it was kind of took that next step and became kind of darker. Like all of the zombie stuff wasn't really until after she had met Chad, and it really started to escalate around in like mid 2019 leading up into the fall when the kids go missing. Do you guys have any thoughts about this, like what their beliefs were?
Yeah, I find it a really interesting belief. I've never actually really heard of it, so to me it seems quite a bizarre situation, and the events are very weird to me.
Yeah, so as you can tell, just very odd. And when you kind of put that into context with all of the other sort of strange events that were happening around that time with the kids and Lori's behavior, there is a lot of red flags that are coming up all over the place. And so that's a little bit of background on Chad and Lori's relationship. And so it was only a year between when they first met and when the kids go missing. And it was a kind of a whirlwind year because that was when Lori and Chad sort of were really, really adamant about these beliefs and really believed and bought into it. And it kind of went to an extreme in many ways. So Katie can take us from here.
Okay, so since there's so many suspicious occurrences and deaths that take place, it's really hard to kind of keep track of everyone and the timelines in which everything happens leading up to the disappearances of Tylee and JJ. So I just want to go back a bit and talk about some of the backgrounds of the people involved. So we have Joseph Ryan, or Joe, who is Tylee's father, and he is Lori's third husband. And he married Lori in 2001, and they divorced in 2005. And there is Charles Vallow, who is Lori's fourth husband, and they were married from 2006 to 2019. I'm actually going to start with Alex Cox, who is one of Lori's brothers. And as we know, he has an interesting role in all of this, as AJ kind of mentioned him earlier. When you listen to that body cam audio that we sampled, you'll hear Lori reveal that Alex is her protector. And so Alex was living in Arizona in 2007, and one day he abruptly just left and went to Texas to take care of some family affairs. So he randomly just got up and went, and he ended up tasing Joseph Ryan and threatening to kill him. In 2008, he actually did plead guilty to second-degree aggravated assault, and he was sentenced to 90 days in jail for this assault on Joe. Apparently, though, even while he was in jail, he was still super focused on Joe, and he writes multiple letters to one of his friends named Tracy, and he writes things in these letters like, quote, "Do me a favor, call Janice, ask her to put Joe's address on a postcard and his license plate. I think it will be popular here," end quote. And in another letter, he writes, quote, "P.S. Can you get a picture from Lori of one of her ex-husbands and send it to me? Some of the guys would like to hang out with him," end quote. So he seems super adamant about harming Joe, and he's not afraid to show it. But this, of course, leads a lot of people, and me as well, to think, what were his motivations and why did he have it out so bad for Joe? Well, there is a recording that surfaces that EastIdahoNews.com released, and apparently it's from Joe's sister, Annie, and it definitely sheds some light on the situation. The recording seems to be of some sort of informal religious discussion that Lori is having with her friends. This recording is from October of 2018, but she's talking about her past and everything that she's been through. The whole thing is about 40 minutes long, but pretty early into it, Lori starts talking about her ex-husband. So at that time, she would have been married to Charles Vallow, and Joe would have been her ex. So you can hear on the tape, and just brace yourself, that she claims she was married to someone very awful who raped her children, and when they divorced, that he joined the church, and everyone thought he was wonderful, and he tried to win everybody over, and she claims that he said horrible things about her in court just to turn everyone against her. She says that she moved from Texas to get away from him, and he followed her just to torture her, but he really just wanted custody of their 3-year-old daughter, which would have been Tylee. And then from the recording you hear, quote, "I was going to murder him. I was going to kill him like the scriptures say, just to stop the pain and to stop him coming after me and to stop him coming after my children," end quote. She goes on to say that at this point in her life, she really had nothing to lose. So if her brother Alex was her protector, as she said, and he believed all of this that she was telling him, that definitely kind of gives a motive for him wanting to kill Joe. And this custody battle that she speaks of lasted for 12 years until he died of an apparent heart attack in 2018. His death was originally ruled as natural causes, but police have since conducted further investigation into this due to the circumstances surrounding this case. And it took apparently weeks for Lori to inform Joe's family of his death. So at the time of Joe's death, which was on April 3rd of 2018, Lori was married to Charles. And just a few months after Joe's death is when Lori meets Chad. Some sources say it was October, some say December, but it was around that time of the same year, 2018. And it's shortly after that that Lori goes on her little 58-day hiatus, where she disappears and nobody knows where she went. And it's around this time that Charles is definitely sensing some really odd behavior, aside from her abandoning her family for 2 months. This is when he kind of tries to protect himself and his family from Lori. So at the end of January 2019, he really has this need to protect his family and protect himself from Lori. And he petitions to the police for an involuntary hold of Lori, and they do take her in for an interview and an evaluation, but police say that even though she goes willingly, she is released hours later. And Melanie Gibb does mention this in her interview with Dateline. And a couple days later, he files for a protection order on behalf of JJ and Tylee to keep Lori away from JJ, to keep her away from JJ's school and their home. Things are getting pretty scary, and Lori allegedly claims that Charles has been replaced by a man named Nick Snyder. Melanie also talks about this in her interview, and this is where all the zombie talk comes in. According to Lori, Charles is now a zombie, and Nick Snyder has replaced his soul. So it's obvious to see why Charles is concerned and, really trying to do whatever he can to keep Lori away from himself and his kids. So going back to this evaluation briefly that I had just talked about, it sticks out to me that Lori, obviously she hid a lot of things from the police when she was talking to them. I mean, if she was in a full-on psychosis, she likely wouldn't have the ability to differentiate what was happening in her head and what was real. And so I feel like a lot of the zombie information and the radical religious beliefs would come out during this. But it seems like she made a conscious effort to hide this from the police. And so, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but I feel like that would take, some planning and thinking on her part. Do you guys have any comments at this point?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that during that evaluation, she is, knowingly withholding information that she knows would be troublesome to the police or to the person who's interviewing her. So if, in the future or anything, we're going to be trying to build this sort of, not mentally capable to stand trial because she had some mental health issues or something like that. This kind of shows that she was to a degree calculated because she knows to withhold certain information that she knows would not sound good.
Yeah, so I definitely feel the same, that she is trying to hide things purposely from the cops. So at this point, Charles files for divorce in February, and he files for sole custody of JJ. And this feels like deja vu talking about this. She went through the same thing with Joe, fighting for custody with him up until he died. And in some of the papers that Charles filed, he claims that Lori said she would murder him if he got in the way of her preparing for God's second coming in July of 2020. And I'm going to play a couple of clips of Charles's conversation with the police.
So what makes her a danger to herself and to others?
Threatened me, murder me, kill me.
She threatened to murder you?
Yes.
You don't know if she posed a threat to your children.
I don't know what she's going to do with them. I don't know if she's going to flee with them, she's going to hurt them.
And so as you can hear, Charles obviously sees that something has shifted in Lori, and he reveals some scary revelations that he has via text to a friend. In March 2019, he allegedly texts, quote, "Things have changed so dramatically in the past 6 months," end quote. And in another text, he says, quote, "Something snapped. It's so unbelievable and scary," end quote. Looking at how all of this unraveled, it just seems really tragic to think about what Charles and the kids were going through during all of this, and the foresight that Charles had. Like, he knew he had to prepare for the worst. And it was around this time that he filed for divorce that he discovered that the password for his life insurance account had been changed. So Charles had a $1 million life insurance policy, and Lori knew about it. And Fox 10 Phoenix News posted an email that he had sent to the life insurance company, and I'm just going to read an excerpt from it. So, quote, "I was notified by the insurance company that a password was placed on the account on 2/20. They are doing an investigation and will pull the voice recordings. I assure you it was Lori. I will update you with the findings. I'm locked out of my own life policy until further notice. If anything should happen to me before I get all this fixed, my beneficiary is Ethel Kathleen Woodcock. She will use it to take care of JJ. I want nothing to go to Lori or any member of her family," end quote. And Lori mentions this to the police when they question her about JJ, and I think it was a surprise to her that his life insurance policy had been changed, because she allegedly had tried to cash out on this life insurance policy shortly after he died, just to find out that she was no longer the beneficiary. So it seems like Charles definitely knew what was coming, and tragically he was shot by Alex Cox on July 11th, 2019 in Chandler, Arizona. Charles had come to JJ's house to pick him up for school, and Alex, who claimed self-defense, had no charges laid against him. I'm going to play the 911 tape.
911, where is your emergency?
It's at 5531 South Four Peaks. I think it's Four Peaks Lane, I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, you say you don't know the direction?
I don't know the street name, if it's a lane or court.
It's 5531 East, though?
Yeah, or South
South
Four Peaks.
5531 South Four Peaks in Chandler. Is that right?
Yes.
You need
Yes.
police or paramedics?
Both. I'm in police and an ambulance.
What's the emergency there?
I got in a fight with my brother-in-law and I shot him in self-defense.
Okay, let me get the medics on the phone. And is he hurt or is he alive? Or
Yeah, there's blood. He's not moving.
how long ago did this happen?
A couple of minutes.
Fire department, what is the address of the emergency?
5531 South Four Peaks.
And is that a house in Chandler?
I shot my brother-in-law.
Okay, what part of his body is injured?
In the chest.
I'm sorry, where?
In the chest.
Okay, is he awake and responsive or unconscious?
Unconscious.
Okay, is he breathing?
I can't tell.
Okay, are you willing to go over to him and check?
Sure.
Okay, do you just let me know if you see his chest going up and down? How old is he?
It's not moving. He's 60.
Okay, and are you wanting to start CPR?
No, I don't know how to do that.
I can walk you through it.
Okay.
And what I want you to do is you're going to put one hand in the center of his chest.
Yeah.
The other hand's going to go right on top of it.
Okay.
You're going to interlock your fingers, keeping your arms straight, and you're going to press down hard and fast into his chest. You're going to go 2 inches down and fairly quickly. 1. We're going to stage for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, just keep going with those compressions. Petey, did you have any other questions?
Yes, what's your name, sir?
My name is Alex. Last name is Cox, C-O-X.
And where are you in the house now?
In the living room.
And where is the gun?
It's in a bedroom.
Who else is there in the house with you?
Just me.
What's his name, your brother-in-law?
Charles Vallow.
How long ago did this occur? Did it just happen?
Yeah, maybe 5 minutes before I called.
So as you can hear, he's super calm and matter of fact. It seems suspicious, but maybe he's just really calm in stressful situations. He claims that no one else was at home, but we find out later that Lori, JJ, and Tylee were all in the home when this happened. And after the shooting, Lori seems really cheery, even though she allegedly had to walk past his body to get out of the house. She takes JJ to school, and then hours later she has a pool party. She texts Charles's sons the next day to let them know that their dad has died, and she's super cagey about the details. They text her, quote, "Lori, what the fuck happened? You can't just tell us our dad died and disappear. You're not too busy to just let us know he died and then disappear," end quote. She said that she needed to wait for the medical examiner for details, even though she clearly knows what happened. And all the text exchanges go on for days. And she even tells some people that he committed suicide. So here's a clip of the body cam footage from the police outside of her house when they're questioning Lori about the shooting. And following that is a police officer talking to the sheriff about the situation. So take a listen.
Does your husband live here or no?
No, he lives in Houston.
Gotcha.
We just moved in here.
Gotcha. How long have you guys lived here?
Sorry?
How long have you lived here?
Like 3 weeks.
Oh, geez. Yeah, okay.
That's why the neighbors took us.
Gotcha.
Like, hi neighbor, sorry.
Are you working at all?
No.
Okay. And you're still about 5'6", 120? Wife, husband got into a verbal argument. Brother steps in and says, just get out. At some point, the niece grabs the bat and is poking her dad. Dad takes the bat away. They decide to leave. Everyone leaves. There's a son too, a younger son. Her son, he's not here either. So wife who lives here, her daughter, her son, they all leave. Her brother staying here, visiting, and the husband. They get into it. He says they got in an argument. Husband hit him in the head with a bat. Brother says, that goes to his room, grabs his gun, his own gun, goes back out, doesn't stay in the room, doesn't lock the door, doesn't call husband, goes back out, confronts him, says, drop the bat. The guy just dropped the bat. He says he shoots him. Goes back into his room, puts his gun away, grabs his phone, cleans his head up, calls 911.
Do you guys have any thoughts about these recordings?
Yeah, like, Lori's demeanor is so troubling, or at least to me if I was the police officer. You know, she's laughing and just doesn't sound like someone whose brother just killed her ex-husband. I mean, even though it is her ex-husband, like, someone was shot in her home with her kids present. So it's just not really the demeanor that you would expect from somebody who was legitimately innocent or sad about the situation.
Yeah, I agree with AJ. Going back to the 911 call, like where Alex is calling 911, he just seems so calm and like cool. I just don't understand like how he can be so calm, and Lori just like laughing it off like nothing happened. I don't know, it's just all very eerie.
Yeah, in the 911 tape of Alex, like, what stuck out to me the most was when he's saying, oh, he's not breathing, and then the operator is saying, oh, can you do CPR? And he just seems adamant, like he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to help Charles at all, which is obviously a red flag for me. Like, if you were, I don't know, it was just so weird to me when I heard it for the first time.
Yeah, same. Like, I know everybody reacts to like situations differently, but to me, he just doesn't seem like he cares. He obviously doesn't want Charles alive, because if Charles alive, then he knows things. So why would he help him?
Yeah, I agree that both of their behavior during all this is super weird. Like, yeah, like Alex is way too calm, it seems, and Lori is, you know, kind of just way too happy for what is happening in her house at the moment. So now we're getting into the time where Lori starts to do the suspicious things that we were talking about earlier in regard to preparing the kids to go missing, so people really wouldn't wonder where they were. She sells JJ's service dog, contacts the school about homeschooling, gets a storage locker, and things like that. Now it is October of 2019, and the kids still have not even been reported missing at this point. And Chad Daybell's wife is found dead on October 19th. His wife, Tammy, and Chad had been married since 1990, and they had 5 kids together. Originally, her death is ruled as a death from natural causes, but her body was later exhumed in December of 2019, and they are now treating it as suspicious. So Tammy doesn't really come up a lot in this case. She was mentioned around the time when JJ was last seen alive, and as AJ mentioned with that text with Chad about the new grave in the yard, maybe she was onto them, maybe she knew something awful was happening or had happened, and they just had to get rid of her because of that. Just 2 weeks after Tammy's death, Chad and Lori are married. Photos of them happy in Hawaii, newlyweds on their honeymoon. And this is just another example of Lori showing absolutely no remorse or sadness of any kind for all the deaths that are happening around her. And it's just really not a good look, especially for someone that has missing kids. In November, they apply for a rental home, stating that they are a clean couple with no kids. And this is when people are starting to notice what's going on, and the kids are reported missing, as we explained earlier. So we're all caught up except for one more thing. Alex Cox is found unresponsive in his home on December 12th of 2019, and he later died of what was reported as natural causes. The man who talks to the police, his name was Joseph Lopez, and he claims that he didn't know Alex's last name and that it was his mother's boyfriend. But later it's revealed that Alex actually married Joseph's mother, Zaluma Pastenes, and he actually changed his last name to her last name. So, that's super odd in itself. Whether any of this is related, we don't really know. And it is kind of an interesting detail, as they did get married suddenly in Las Vegas, and the chapel owner says that it was all business, no emotion. It lasted only 8 minutes, the wedding. And so what comes to mind to me for this is not having to testify against your spouse in court. So maybe he was kind of securing himself that safety by marrying her, because maybe she knew something that he didn't want to get out. Now it's January of 2020, and Steph is going to take it from here.
I'm going to take you to January 26th. This is the day when Chad and Lori were found vacationing in Hawaii and questioned by the police. So they had a search warrant to search their car, and they unfortunately found no evidence that JJ or Tylee were ever in the car or with Chad and Lori at the time. When the FBI asked Lori where her children were, she didn't really give them an answer. She kind of just beat around the bush, said they were safe, but she wouldn't give the location. She didn't really seem too concerned about their whereabouts. The fact that she didn't really seem to care that her children were missing and had no really deep concerns for them posed quite a bit of red flags for the FBI. So at the time, Lori was given 5 days, so on January 30th, to produce her children. If she could not produce her children at this given time, she would be faced with criminal charges. So, as you probably can guess, January 30th came and Lori had missed her court date, and she did not produce her children, and this was not okay for the FBI. This is when they started really opening up the investigation into what happened to Tylee and JJ. So Lori was arrested, and since she was in Hawaii at the time, she was extradited back to Idaho. And of course, Chad was by her side the whole entire time. He didn't seem too worried. He just seemed cool and collective. So he was there for moral support, I guess. So they did it. They started the open investigation, and Lori was charged with 2 felony counts of desertion of a child, 3 misdemeanors, resisting and obstructing an officer, solicitation of a crime, and contempt. And the contempt stemmed from ignoring her court order. Her bail hearing was scheduled for February 2020, and at her hearing, her bail was set at $5 million. Before Chad and Lori had left for Hawaii, they were seen giving a bunch of donations to a Goodwill, and the police wanted to know about these items that were given away. So they asked a witness who worked at the Goodwill store and asked if they knew about any of the items that were brought in. But unfortunately, the witness couldn't provide any detailed information as there was so much coming in that day. So that lead kind of went to a dead end. What do you guys think about this whole, like, them being arrested in Hawaii and them not really seeming to care about the missing children?
Well, I remember when it was first on the news and everything, like, I feel like I knew, like, immediately that day, with the Friday that I first saw it, that she was guilty. Like, just based on her demeanor and, like, the fact that she's avoiding it and putting up a big fight about not producing her children. Like, obviously, she's hiding something. You know, you're not reluctant to bring your children in that are missing if they're actually still alive or they're with you and you know where they are. I don't know. I knew right away, or at least suspected right away.
And yeah, this whole, like, oh, you have 5 days to produce your kids. I feel just like if he doesn't tell you right now where they are, like, it's over now. Like, you're coming with us, because obviously there's something going on. Like, this whole waiting for 5 days is just, I don't know, it just seems kind of crazy. And I remember thinking that at the time too.
Yeah, like 5 days you think would be enough time for someone to produce their children if they knew where they were at the time. And to me,
well, yeah, it should only take a second. Where are your kids? Here they are. Okay, like, it shouldn't be like, okay, you have 5 days to figure out where your kids are and tell us. Like, you should know exactly where they are, who they're with, the phone number, the address. Like, it shouldn't be 5 days.
Like, I totally agree. Like, I don't know why they gave her 5 days. Like, they should have gave her, like, a minute to, like, tell her where her kids are. If she couldn't provide an answer, then she'd have been arrested that day.
Well, she had already had like a month before that, like November, they were looking for the kids initially. Like, she had since November. This is January. She already had 2 months. Why give her 5 more days? Like, to me, that's just so crazy.
And for her to take off vacationing in Hawaii after she's known she's been questioned by the police of where her kids are, that just seems too suspicious to me. So during Lori's preliminary hearing, she had appointed 3 attorneys. And about halfway through her hearing, 2 of her attorneys just withdrew themselves from the case. So that just left one lawyer, Mark Means. And while the hearing was going on, Mark also requested that the judge recuse himself from the case. And for some undisclosed reasons, the judge grants the request and recuses himself. I'm not quite sure. I've never really heard of a judge recusing themselves from a case. I don't know if that has to, like, if he had any prior information or he knew something that he shouldn't have, or I don't know. Have you guys have heard anything about judges accusing themselves from a cases like this, especially a high profile case?
No, the only thing I can think of is maybe they knew in the past that he, you know, like, I'm just thinking of, like, the religious beliefs. Maybe he was like the kind of judge that in the past didn't have sympathy for, you know, kind of these crazy religious cults, so they thought that maybe they wouldn't have a chance because they knew his past with that kind of thing. That's the only thing I can really think of.
Yeah, I never actually thought about that, but yeah, that would make sense. He must have.
And I know, but I mean, I know that, like, judges, they can't have, like, their own thoughts and prejudices into their judgment, but maybe there was a similar case that he looked at in the past and he, you know, didn't have any forgiveness at all.
So also during the preliminary hearing, the police were trying to track down any leads on the witnesses who might have been at Yellowstone Park on the day Tylee was last seen. They wanted to see if anybody saw anything suspicious, but no one had come forward and there was no lead, and it just went to a dead end. April 7th, 2020, Mark Means, Lori's attorney, had filed a motion of discovery. So he requested the autopsy and toxicology of Lori's 2 husbands, her brother, and Tammy Daybell. All of those documents were granted except for the autopsy of Tammy Daybell, because at the time there was no autopsy done or any information that was made public about that. So also to know that, like, I'm not really sure why he requested all of these. Maybe he was trying to find some discrepancies in the police interviews or some misinformation. I think that's the only reason why he wanted all those documents to be handed over to him.
Yeah, and I'm curious about, like, the outcomes of these other autopsies from these people that died of natural causes. There seems to be quite a few of them that happened, you know, prematurely.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe he was trying to find out more information on that.
Like, what are the chances of that many people in the same family dying of natural causes within this short amount of time? Like, I feel like that's a very, very odd coincidence.
Yeah, definitely some red flags going up there. So he also noticed that there was an email that Chad had sent Lori that was made public. And it basically, this email was that Lori just wanted to look into her family history, like a family tree sort of thing. This email was really odd to me. I don't know, it might have something to do with her religion. She wanted to see what her ancestors were like and stuff, but I don't really know how this pertains to the case, but
I think it could have something to do with maybe a pattern of mental health in her family if she's trying to use that as part of her defense to see that it runs in her family.
Yeah, that could be the case too. But yeah, that's interesting for sure. So there's a lot of things going on during this case, during this hearing. For Lori's attorneys, it seems like they're trying to get as much information and evidence as they can to help Lori. But things aren't really looking that well for her at this point. While Lori was waiting the outcome of her preliminary hearing, Chad Daybell was arrested on felony charges on June 9th after human remains were found on his property. And this search stemmed from the police coming to their house and they wanted a search warrant done on the property and some computer data that was taken from the house. So as they were continuing to search their property, which was a pretty lengthy search radius, it was quite a big yard. It took them a day to actually find some evidence of human remains. And on June 10th, the bodies of JJ and Tylee Ryan were identified. After the bodies were found, Chad and Lori's demeanor did not change. They just seemed like they didn't care. Kind of like, I don't know, to me when I was watching one of their videos in court, that they just seemed so cold-hearted and just very like creepy to me. Anyways, I don't know. That was just my thought on that. But going back to the bodies, they were identified by Brandon Boudreaux. There is a video I'm going to play. It's Special Agent Stephen Daniels, and he's describing when he discovered the bodies, what type of condition they were in, and how they were found, and what actually went on during the search. I am going to warn you that it is very disturbing and very hard to listen to, so listener discretion is advised.
Once we saw what appeared to be the black garbage bag, we needed to kind of verify, do we have human remains here? And so it kind of fell upon me to get in there, and I took a razor blade and I made a cut to this garbage bag. Prior to making the cut on the garbage bag, I got in there with my hands and I just kind of removed the dirt around the object, and the object was just a oval shaped object, and the plastic bag was just tightly wrapped, tightly against this oval shape, and to me it just felt like the shape of a skull.
Can you describe what you see on State's Exhibit 24?
That was the part of that black plastic that we initially saw. And then once I made the cut through the black plastic bag, a white plastic bag was underneath. And the white plastic bag, appeared to me to be a possible white garbage bag with diamond-shaped texture to it.
Okay. And what did you do once you found that?
So when then on the diamond, or on the white plastic bag underneath, I pulled that one up and I made a similar cut with the razor blade. And then as I cut through the white plastic, that's when the, possible human hair started coming out onto my hands. And that was the point where we determined this is human remains.
Okay. And what did you do after that?
And then after that, the rest of the team continued the excavation of the grave. And then eventually we uncovered the entire body that was wrapped in this black plastic bag with a lot of duct tape, intermingled.
Okay. Agent, do you recognize State's Exhibit 25?
I do.
Can you describe for the court what you see in State's Exhibit 25?
This is kind of the overall photo of what came to be known for us as the pet cemetery. And in this photo, you can see that statue of the dog. And then right in front of that statue, there was what I would call an area that looked like it was a grave. And then near that grave, there was what I would say were maybe 2 or 3, maybe besides that one, maybe 2 other areas that looked like they could have been graves to me. I imagined these graves, since it was a pet cemetery, or we thought pets were buried here based off a text message. We eventually, the next significant thing is we hit a bone, sticking out of the ground, and it kind of leads into some flesh. And at the time, our anthropologists still can't make a determination if that's animal or human. And so the team starts trying to excavate whatever this is. And then eventually we're able to excavate a few pieces. The major piece ends up being a pelvic piece.
Exhibit 27 is being shown to the witness.
Agent, do you recognize Exhibit 27?
I do.
What is it?
That shows burial site number 2. We find, this melted green bucket. And then to the bottom, the side of that green bucket, we eventually find a skull. And then to the side of that skull, we find a mandible with some teeth.
So yeah, after watching that, it's so disturbing how the evidence they found and how the bodies were discovered. I can't even imagine what the kids were going through at the time. Do you guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, it's really disturbing to think that the parents planned and executed this.
Yeah, it's pretty terrible. You just, you can't help but think about what kind of person would do this. And, you hear him describing that there's duct tape on JJ's body and everything. And it's so obviously he was, alive when they put the duct tape on him. And it's just for someone's own mother to duct tape her child and kill him somehow and then put him in this shallow grave in the backyard of her partner's house. To me, it's just so vile that somebody would be able to do that. And yeah, hearing him describe it in that audio clip is just, yeah, it's crazy.
It gives me the chills. I can't imagine. I don't really want to imagine what they went through because it's just horrible. And for Larry and Kay Woodcock, to hear this in court is just devastating for them. To find out what happened in the state they were in, I feel so bad for them. Lori was slapped with 2 new charges, and these charges were conspiracy to destroy, alter, and conceal evidence. And I'm actually pretty surprised that nobody to this point has been charged with murder. I don't know how they aren't charged with murder at this point.
Yeah, I just think it's bizarre that they wouldn't have been charged immediately. The bodies were found on Chad's property, and then when you corroborate that with the cell phone records that I talked about earlier of Alex Cox and coinciding with those days when they were last seen, to me that would be enough to kind of give them those murder charges. So the fact that it's still ongoing and still there isn't an official murder charge as of this recording is pretty wild, considering that the bodies were found in June. So now we're looking at 7-8 months ago that the bodies were found with some pretty hard evidence to point towards Lori and Chad, and there still haven't been official murder charges laid against either one of them. Is pretty interesting, and I'm not really sure why it's taking so long. And I don't really know the intricacies of the legal system, and so I'm sure there's a lot of legal stuff happening regarding that, but it's just that did strike me as odd.
So Chad appeared in court via Zoom. His bail was set at $1 million. And also to note that on July 18th, 2020, the judge had made changes to Lori's bail, and it was $150K, so $50K for each misdemeanor charge. And the $1 million bail in Fremont County still stands. Different states means different amount of bail bonds, because where she was arrested in Hawaii and then brought to Idaho, that's why she has two different bails. One set at $150K and the other set at $1 million. And the jury trial was set to begin in January 2021. Going back to the deaths of Lori's two children, Lori's two husbands, and her brother Alex, it just makes you stop and think, like, are all these deaths just so convenient? Like, there's so many deaths in one family that just seem too suspicious and just convenient to them. So yeah, I just, like, do you guys feel like that? Like, do you feel there's just so many different scenarios that could be played out?
Yeah, I definitely think the other deaths, like the natural causes deaths, are definitely suspicious, and they do seem a little bit too convenient. As for the lack of murder charges, I feel that, you know, the cops always know more than they release, and maybe they think that, you know, Alex actually was the main perpetrator in this case. Maybe he actually did kill the kids, so the other two didn't actually commit the murders. However, I feel like they were involved somehow in the planning, or they knew about it afterwards. They definitely went along with it, so I feel like they should be held accountable.
Because of the coronavirus pandemic, their trial was supposed to start in January, but it got pushed until July of this year, of 2021. So their trial has not begun yet. The only new information that has come out since the summer was that their trials will be combined, so it'll just be one trial with the two of them. This was a choice of their defense attorney, and I'm not sure if, like, combining them is a good idea. I don't know the logistics around that. Like, I don't know why they would be tried together. Just because they're married, that doesn't always mean you'd be tried together. Like, that just seemed really, it kind of shocked me, actually, to know they weren't being tried separately but together. Do you know any more information about that? Like, would there be a reason why they'd combine them?
Yeah, I don't think that happens very often, and I feel like maybe it's because they would have the same evidence in both cases, and they've already both agreed that they're not going to testify against each other, so there's not that you know, aspect of it. So there's no point in putting them separately, because there's not going to be any different information coming out of both of those trials. But but I mean, if they're both found not guilty, then they're both off. If they did it separately, at least maybe one of them could go to jail. But yeah, it's kind of risky at the same time.
Yeah, like, I think it's super risky for the defense to combine the trials, because maybe he's hoping that if they are found not guilty, then they both will get off, which is kind of scary to think. If they are found not guilty somehow, that they could just be free in the world, and I don't know, it's crazy.
I feel like they had to be found guilty of something and go to jail for a good amount of time. Yeah. If it's not murder, then, you know, I feel like there definitely is something there.
It's like, it has to be like conspiracy to murder type. Like, if they come back,
accessory to murder, or you know,
after the fact.
Yeah. So
if they convinced Alex, her brother, to do it, then he's the murderer, but they still had their hands in the part of it as well.
Yeah, and they were buried in, you know, in Chad's yard, so there's no way he didn't know about it. So they're guilty.
I'm wondering if the pet cemetery, they found, like, when they dug up the stuff, they also found, like, dogs and, like, a cat and stuff like that. So it's kind of like just like a sick scenario all around.
I wonder if they did find that raccoon that Chad had talked about.
Oh, right? Yeah,
because if not, then obviously he
lied.
Yeah, which is obviously that he obviously did, but maybe there was some truth to that. I don't know.
Maybe.
And either way,
And we'll never know the whole truth because half the people that know the truth are no longer with us.
Yeah. I feel like that's why. It's because they knew.
It's only Chad and Lori, and they're sure as hell not going to tell us.
Yeah.
What the truth is, because why would they? But yeah, so it's quite the case, quite the wild case.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys were saying. It's definitely an interesting case, and I don't think it's going to be a very hard time for them to come up with a defense that is believable to me, just based on everything that we've discussed and everything that's out there about the case. It's going to be tough for them. But yeah, I agree that it's definitely an interesting case, and because it's still ongoing, it's still going to be a while before we actually see any what the outcome of it is. But we're going to be watching it closely, and we can update you guys as it happens, because I know that we're all interested to find out where it all ends up.
Yeah, as things happen, we'll try and maybe keep everybody updated about it.
And hopefully we get a good outcome.
Yeah, hopefully, for sure.
So that does it for this episode of Crime Family. We thank you so much for listening in. If you like what you hear, please make sure to subscribe to us on your favorite podcast streaming app. That way you're notified as soon as we release a new episode. The amazing music throughout our podcast is done by the awesome Tim Monis. You can find him on Instagram at Tim Monis. You can also find us on Instagram at Crime Family Podcast and on Twitter at Crime Family Pod 1. So we can't wait until the next episode, and we hope you'll join us then. Thank you so much. Take care.